You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Okay, oh my goodness, today I am so excited. I am joined by an absolute joy of a human being, Unyime Oguta. Unyime is a speaker, certified intuitive eating counselor, and non-diet nutrition coach. As a mom of 3, Unyime is passionate about teaching women how to leverage the power of their minds to let go of food fears and obsession. Why? So that they can thrive and feel empowered to honor their needs and transform their lives with ease and confidence. We have an amazing conversation about food and body freedom. We talk about how to incorporate intuitive eating principles with our children and what it means to emotionally eat. Unyime shares her food and body story. She continually, throughout the conversation, pushes me to do the same, and the result is really amazing. We talk about societal pressures around motherhood, food, body image, self-care, and you're going to want to hear what Unyime has to say about her mommy time. So as usual, stay tuned after the show for my final thoughts, and here's our conversation. Hey Unyime, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Christy, for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
Yes, I have so many questions for you, but I would love to just start with you telling me and the listeners a little bit about your story and how you came to be a certified intuitive eating counselor.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me once again. My story started about 8 years, I would say now. And I was the yes mom who did everything. I was just new mom, trying to be the best mother that I could be. And I was actually pregnant with my second child, going to school, trying to finish up my second degree in nutrition and working full time. And over the course of about 6 months, I had really extreme symptoms that were showing up. I wasn't sleeping well. I was having a lot of digestive issues. And I reached out to my doctor. So we did a lot of tests, did different medications, nothing was working. And finally, she said, you know what? I think you have IBS. So the next step was just sending me for a colonoscopy, which scared the living daylight out of me. For anyone who's ever had IBS, that was the next step to confirm whether or not that was the right way to go. So I asked for a week and I never went back. And I never went back because over that week, I really did some soul searching and started, doing my own research and found that everything that was going on with me came back to stress. Stress does take a toll on people in different ways. And for me, it showed up in my body. It showed up in how my digestive system was working. So we had a conversation and she said, you have to give something up, which was really hard for me. Being the yes mom, being the one who did everything, it was hard to say I would let go of one thing because I felt like if I dropped something, then I would disappoint people. So I really needed to come back and start to think what exactly matters for me, what exactly matters in the life that I'm trying to create. And that's when I started asking questions. So I found out that I wasn't the only one struggling. There were so many moms out there who were going through this, but a lot of us were just used to sucking it up and putting on a happy face and going wherever we wanted to go. But that didn't work for me because my body was telling me, no, you have to give up something. So I really just started to talk more about it, started to create a space where I could talk to people and hear their stories. And one of the things that stood out to me was that a lot of us moms struggle with our bodies and food, especially after we've had kids when your body doesn't snap back. And then you have a child who doesn't eat the way the professionals or the experts recommend. So you start to feel guilty, you start to feel ashamed about yourself. And I thought this is a really important thing that we should be talking about. But I never felt that I was qualified enough, even though I had the personal experience. I felt like I needed to know more. So that's how that whole path took me down to intuitive eating. Although I was doing something like that, I never knew that that was intuitive eating because for me, I started tuning into what exactly feels good for my body. And when I eat, how does my body respond? So fast forward a few years later, I came across intuitive eating and I found out that I could actually get certified to help other moms, to help other women to do that. That's when I got my certification. And doing that work really helped me to own my experience and gave me the ability to be able to hold the space for other people's experiences that don't look like mine, to be able to come through, to be able to support them in that realm. So that's pretty much it.
So going back to, colonoscopy or run, um, when you took that week and before you maybe knew exactly what intuitive eating is, before you got involved in getting your certification, like how did you just as a person start to get in tune with your body and what made you feel good? Like where did you start?
For one, I think this is something that I've had since I was a child. I'm very intuitive in nature, and my coach always says that I'm an old soul because I think the way other people don't think about things. So it was mostly just about sitting down. I knew what I wanted. I knew that I didn't want to struggle. I knew that there were things where that I was doing that were not for me. I was such a big people pleaser. I was very into perfectionistic tendencies. So those things tended to drive my life. And I thought, well, if I want to give up some things, I really need to start from these two things that are not really serving me. And how do I do that? The only way I knew to do was through food because that was where my body was responding. But once I
Interesting.
started tuning into the food, then I realized I wasn't sleeping well. There were days when I would just sleep on 2 hours of sleep. So I really had to pull back and prioritize sleep. And then I started to notice my body changing. So just doing those little changes made a difference. And that's what really encouraged me to keep going. And I thought, well, if I'm sleeping and my body's changing and I'm eating this way and my body's changing, can I say no to people? Which for people pleasers out there, you all know this. It's so difficult to do that. But I did it. And there were people who were upset at me. But I thought, you know what? If I'm going to survive, if I want to be someone who is thriving, I really need to put those boundaries in place. And it wasn't an easy thing. It's still something that I work through because that's how my natural tendency is. But I recognize that, I own that, and I do get the support. I have a coach who coaches me through that. And then that's just what I do.
Yeah, and you've said you kind of weaved in your tagline there from surviving to thriving. I mean,
Hmm.
why do you think that that's such a struggle for moms and women?
The biggest thing that comes to mind is just that's the way we've been brought up from
Yeah.
a very young age. Look at the little girls or those who have been taught or who self identify as girls. It's you play with the dolls. And what do the dolls do? The dolls cook, the dolls wear dresses. So we're taught these things from a very young age from what we see in the media, perhaps for some of us through the generations of women that have come before us. It's a part of the culture. So then we're not taught to stand up for ourselves. If you're a girl who speaks up, as a child, an adult might say that you're, too loud or you're too bossy. So then you've learned over the years to quiet that part of you. And that's why we don't speak up. So even when we're struggling, we think, well, I don't want to rock the boat. So I'd rather just be quiet. I'd rather just sit here and not say anything. And it's a huge struggle for us because a lot of us have this thought, I should know, right? We think automatically because I'm a mom, there's a certificate that tells me I know everything and I know just what to do when my child is up at 2 a.m. in the morning and crying. And because we feel we should know, there's this sense of shame that comes with wanting to reach out. This is something that I coach a lot of my moms on because it's not something that comes naturally to us. And sometimes we just really need to pay attention and know that it's okay. It's okay for us to be able to stand in our power. That doesn't make us a bad person. It just puts us in a place where we're better prepared and better able to handle whatever stresses come our way.
And so along those lines, and I do have plenty of questions for you about nutrition and eating and whatnot, but
Ask
since we're
away.
here, before we do that, since we're here, I want to ask, I know you're a mom. Are you, can you think of any concrete examples where you were trying to do things differently in your house, how your kids are being raised, how we stop this cycle?
The biggest one is just putting boundaries with my kids. And like we were chatting before when you said you have a 3.5-year-old, sometimes it's really challenging when they're that
Yeah.
little and always depending on us to just say no, right? You want to take some time for yourself and maybe just sit down with your mind to calm yourself down, and your child wants to play. And a lot of us feel guilty for saying no. So, one of the things I learned really early was helping my children learn to play with themselves. I'm available to play with them, but ultimately, that is their job to keep themselves entertained, to keep themselves busy. And as long as no one is in trouble, no one's getting hurt, you can do whatever you need to do. Mommy will be right here. So I always taught my kids about mommy time. And mommy time is just once you see the door shut, I'll give everyone a warning. Like, I'm going to take like 5 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever time I need. This is mommy time. So when it's mommy time, you don't touch mommy, you don't wake mommy up unless someone is bleeding or someone is in trouble. And I remember when I did this, my first daughter, she's very strong-willed. She was so upset. Oh, that means you don't love us. And I said, no, it's because I love you. That's why I'm doing this. Because sometimes our children know how to play that card. If they're really smart, they'll play the card of you don't love me or you're not showing love. But that's left for you to define what does love mean in the context of our household. For me, loving my kids means I'm in a calm place. I'm not overly stretched. I'm not stressed out because when I'm there, nobody likes me when I'm that way, right? We all know
Right.
this. Like we just come out crazy and we're like, who is this person? So I don't like going there. And in order for me
Right.
not to get there, I need to do whatever I can to take care of myself. And that involves mommy time. So that's just one of the things that I've taught my kids.
Yeah, I really like that. And during this mommy time, whether it's for the 5 minutes or say, you have a Saturday morning, how do you take care of yourself? How do you self-care?
I've had different variations over the years. So when my kids were really, really little, that was mostly just napping because I never got enough sleep,
Right.
right? So I would take like half an hour, 20 minutes, and I would just nap and turn on the TV. They would watch. Sometimes it would just be in the next room, or I would just lay on the couch or on the ground so I'm still close to them. And we would do that. So I trained myself. I'm a very light sleeper, but through those years, I trained myself to sleep and just get that rest through the noise, which was fine. Now it's more like I get the time to study. I get the time to read. I get the time to go for a walk. We love going for walks as a family, but when it's mommy's walk time, it's mommy alone. Nobody gets to come. There are different things, and I have a lot of things in my toolkit that, depending on what is going on in my life at that time or how much time I have, that's what I'm going to pull out. If I have 5 minutes, it might just be taking a breather, doing some deep breathing exercises, calming myself. If I have 10 minutes, it might be something else. There are times when it's just sitting down and eating a bowl of ice cream, and I don't want anyone coming close to me. That's also my time. So I'll just do that, and I'll sit in front of the TV and I'll have my bowl of ice cream, and I'm like, okay, let's go. Let's go do whatever we need to do. So it just depends on whatever's going on and how I'm feeling.
Yeah, I think I mean, self-care has gotten so, it started as such a well-intentioned movement and it's become so, I don't know, just muddy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's so many out there who are trying to define for us what self-care should look like.
Yeah.
But I also think that especially moms, I hear this a lot and I know I've struggled with this. We get it in our heads that self-care has to be a day. You know, it's like self-care and you're saying it now. I've heard it before. You know how it goes. You got to keep hearing it over and over that you got to take the time when you need it or when you can get it and utilize it even if it's for short periods of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually had a client who struggled with self-care, and the other time when we were chatting, she said, self-care could just be fixing the squeaky door so I don't need to take a bath or go for a walk, right?
Right.
Because it's
Right.
stressing me out. And one of the things I really teach my clients in my program and through my podcast is how can we define these things for ourselves? Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many people who are trying to decide this is the way it should go. And the funny thing is, a lot of us are tired of being told what to do. But then
Yeah.
when we start to think about things like self care, we're looking for the right formula,
Right.
we're looking for the right time. And motherhood, like I said, it's chaotic. You're never
Mm-hmm.
going to find that peace of mind, that little time that you can say, okay, every day at 3 o'clock, I'm going to do this. No, because that's not reality for most moms. So, how can you make that work in the context of your life? Are you a busy mom who 3 o'clock never happens? Is that when your kids go for a nap? Maybe you can take time. Some other people at 3, they're working. I work full time too. So at 3 o'clock, I'm working. But I can
Mm-hmm.
take time early in the morning before my kids wake up or after they go to bed and do my self care practice or during the day. And I just give them the warning. They know I've trained them to do that. And they just know that it's mummy's time. We need to
Yeah.
define these things for ourselves.
Yeah. So it sounds like, and I know I'm not by any means making a blanket statement that you've perfected this because we know perfection is not what we're striving for here.
Oh, trust me, I have not perfected it in any way.
But you seem to have a decent handle on it, right? And if at the very least recognize how important it is.
Absolutely.
So where is an area in your motherhood or your parenting or just yeah, I'll stick with that for now, where you are trying to be better or work on for yourself?
The area that comes to mind right now is perfectionism. So I've
Mm,
been quite vocal about perfectionism, and I just realized I haven't talked about that on my podcast. But over the past couple of years, I would say, I've been really working on letting go of perfectionism. And my coach actually was working with me, and I said, I think I've gone really far with this. And she said, where else could this be showing up in your life? Which no
mm-hmm,
one had ever asked me. I thought it was all about my body image. I worked on that and it was fine. I was no longer being, perfect in doing things. But then it's showing up in my motherhood, or it was showing up in my
mm,
motherhood. So the way I wanted my kids to show up, we're going to the store. I want them to be these perfect little kids who don't run around the store, who don't cry, who don't throw a tantrum. And that's
mm-hmm,
what I've been working on over the past year. And it's so funny because the other day we were in the grocery store and my 3-year-old, I have a 3-year-old as well, who just started junior kindergarten, but she's still trying to figure out how to manage her emotions.
mm-hmm,
And she's the one who would pick things up and I would say no. And the other day, she actually just like laid down right in the middle of the aisle, screamed her head off. And her older sister was like, oh my God, mom, why don't you look embarrassed? I'm like, what do I have to be embarrassed about? Because through coaching, I've learned that I'm not responsible for her behavior. As long as she's safe and I'm
mm-hmm,
here to remind her that I'm right here if she needs help, I'll just let her express herself. Does that mean that I'm not going to be considerate about other people? Absolutely not. If she's yelling, I will take her out of the store because I don't want
mm-hmm,
other people to feel uncomfortable. But I don't feel bad about it. And I think this is where I used to struggle was I would take my kids' behaviors on myself and feel shame and feel like I'm a bad mom. That doesn't happen anymore because I'm learning to self-coach myself and it lets me also empower them because I can teach them to be responsible for their behaviors. So, yeah, I think that's the area that I'm still working on. And of course, it's
Yeah.
always layered. So, we just keep checking every day and seeing what comes up today and how do we deal with that.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I totally relate. I mean, I think that especially anyone who has kids or has, been a caretaker for children, when you see that in a store, you're really generally, at least I'll speak for myself, I am not looking at that mom and going, oh my God.
Exactly.
I'm looking at that mom or that dad going, yep, been there.
Exactly. Right?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
teaches you to be more empathetic towards those people because you
Yes.
don't know people's stories. It's just like,
Right.
okay, that's just what's going on right now, and that's okay. Let's
Right.
move on.
Yeah. 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 So you've mentioned you have a coach. What type of coach do you work with?
She's a body image and a business coach. So I started working with her for business, but it just sort of went into everything. It
Yeah.
just sort of went into everything. So we talk about everything from business. We had done body image, and now
Hmm.
it's just helping me with anything that comes up. I just chat
Yeah.
with her. Yeah,
No, that's great. I always like to help help anyone listening to know that even the coaches have coaches, even the therapists have therapists. We all need that guidance, that support, that help, even those of not I was about to say those of us, but I'm not really going to include myself in that any longer. Even someone like yourself who has certification and has studied this and has coached people for a while, that no one can do everything on their own all the time. Yeah.
absolutely. And I think it's really important to normalize that because we
Yes.
feel like we see all these people who are like coaches or leaders in their sphere of influence, and we think, oh, they're okay, they've got it all figured out. But
Right.
nobody does, right? So
Right.
I always see coaching as a place where I can be free and vulnerable, and then
Mm-hmm.
someone just taking a look at my brain and my thinking and saying, oh, wait, what's going on over there, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's really hard to admit the truth to yourself. So, but when someone gives you that safe space and they create
Mm-hmm.
the container and the environment for you to be able to speak up and offer you the support, it's so much easier for you to move forward. It's so much easier for you to start creating the results that you do.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So going back now, for anyone who doesn't know, can you talk to me a little bit about what intuitive eating is?
Absolutely. Intuitive eating simply is just a mind body framework that helps you reconnect to your innate wisdom and power so that you can heal your relationship with food. And I always look at it like a lot of us are born, not everyone, because there are people who still struggle, but most of us are born with this ability to be able to identify when we're hungry, when we're full, those bodily cues. But over time, some of those things may have been adjusted, silenced, impacted in one way or another. And that's typically normal based on your environment, based on so many factors. So I see intuitive eating as this support tool that you can have in your toolkit. There are 10 principles, and each of them talks about different aspects of that mind body connection. So whether it's dealing with your thoughts, whether it's dealing with the food itself, whether it's dealing with self care, and just having all that at your fingertip that you can pull out and support yourself. That's the simplest way I like to explain intuitive eating.
Mm-hmm. And this is, oh, the name is escaping me, but the book, I just got it
Yes, by
today. It came in the,
Evelyn
okay,
Tribole and Elise Rich.
okay, so this is anyone who is certified in intuitive eating, and someone like yourself who talks about this is your jam. It's based off of that book. It's not like a separate thing in the sense that someone has to choose one over the other. It's like those are the principles, and then someone like you can come in and actually work with someone one on one through those principles.
Yes, and there are different ways that people do that. So, with the book, for people who are more self-directed, they might find that just going through the book, there's a workbook that you can work through for personal use. People tend to do that, and sometimes you'll find through going through the book, you might find there are areas where you might need more support. So
Mm-hmm.
for some of us who are trained, there are people who go through each principle to teach people. In my program, that's not the way I do it. When I'm coaching women, I tend
Okay.
to lump them because I do talk about different concepts. So I just lump them into one and I help people using my own coaching framework to teach them that. But I do have the principles interwoven within those teachings.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify because even for myself, this is a term that I've now been hearing a little while. I interviewed Caitlin Parsons recently,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been seeing this around. And there was that question that I had of like, is everybody kind of talking about the same thing just in their own way? And I don't mean to minimize it. I just mean to say that, I'm not like when I try to compartmentalize what it is I'm trying to learn and instill for myself, I'm not it's not A, B, C, and D. It's like it's all A. It's just like different types of A. Does that make
Exactly.
sense?
Exactly.
Okay.
And I think that's the thing that's unique about intuitive eating. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just
Mm-hmm.
figuring out who are you, what matters to you, where are you struggling, and how can you apply these principles in your life. So in
Mm-hmm.
my coaching, I've seen some people who have come through my work. They don't struggle with body image, but they
Mm-hmm.
struggle with really just figuring out how hungry am I? I don't eat regularly. How do I do that? So we focus mostly on the things that have to do with eating. There are other people who need both. Other people, it's mostly body image that they're interested in. So we focus on that. And it's just very nuanced in that way.
Do you find that in just using the examples you just gave of who's coming to you and what they're needing help with, do you find that moms tend to sit on one side or the other, or like where are most of your clients falling on that body image or the eating, or I don't know, can you maybe just elaborate on what you just said then?
For the most part, it's usually they start out with food, or most people come to me because of the food. So my coaching program, we focus on helping the moms, but also helping them to help their kids. So most
Mm,
people will come because they're struggling with helping their children eat, and then they start talking about, oh, well, I'm struggling with eating too. But as we start working, because the first month is all about mindset, once we start to uncover those mindset stories, we find that it has to do with body image. It's
mm,
because my body didn't snap back after my baby. This is why I'm
right.
this way. And then we see how that ties into the food. So I would say most of them tend to be in between. Even though it starts out
Mm.
with food, we always end up on the body image side and then we, circle back to food because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you have energy to chase those little ones around.
Yeah. So how would you define a healthy relationship with food?
I tend to go with a healthy relationship with food is just whatever helps your body feel good, helps you perform well, and when you're able to eat without feeling negative emotions. So, the negative emotions that people
Mm,
tend to associate with food, it's like guilt and shame and feeling less than. So, when you just have a pretty simple experience where you can eat and not feel guilty and not feel ashamed, and you can engage with food without thinking about your body, that's when it's healthy.
yeah. I have to say I have not read the book yet. I just got it and but I have, I've had that conversation with Caitlin. I'm having this conversation with you now. I had a conversation with Dr. Alexis Conason.
Mm,
She's the anti-diet
yes.
plan
Hmm.
book. And so I keep kind of dipping my toe in. And I still struggle with wanting, like, everything you're saying about that type of relationship with food sounds absolutely glorious, sounds freeing, empowering. It sounds wonderful. And I've not actually done the work to get there, so I recognize that. However, just sitting here right now, you and I I want all of that, but I also want to lose weight. And I'm having a really hard time reconciling that.
Hmm. And
It's,
that's
yeah, go
normal.
ahead.
That's completely normal to feel that way
Yeah.
because our society rewards people. for losing weight. Our society rewards people for looking thin, for being in a conforming body, which is typically, thin, slender. That's what the society rewards. Look at the media, everything that we watch on TV or read in books. Thankfully, over the maybe past year or two, we're starting to see more diverse bodies, but that's how our society has trained us, especially people who identify as women. It's like that's where your worth is hung. If you're skinny, if you're thin, and you fit in that body, then you're acceptable. Then you're worthy. But we have to really think about it. Where did this come from? There's so much history that has to do with weight loss. And female body image, female body standards have changed so much over the years. There were times when people had to look really skinny, more like they had an eating disorder. So when you think of people like Twiggy, right? And then now we're in the season where it's all about the big hips. I heard someone talk about it the other day. I can't remember what, I think it was like thick something. And it was more like as long as your legs were heavy, you were heavier on the bottom and thinner on the top, that's what's acceptable. But then we have to think about it this way. Our feelings are the things that drive our actions. So even if you want to lose weight, what is driving that feeling? What is driving you to want to lose weight? There's a feeling that we're all chasing. For some people, they want to feel accepted. For some people, they're avoiding the discomfort of having conversations where their family think they're unhealthy. Because a lot of people will say, well, I want to lose weight for health reasons, right? There's something that we're all running away from and that we all want.
Yeah.
That's why I always ask people, tune into that. What is it exactly for you? What's the feeling that you're chasing? Are you thinking when you lose weight, then you'll be more acceptable? Because that's a normal human response. A lot of us are afraid of being socially ostracized. That's our big fear as humans. We don't want to be outside, right? Because when we were, still living in caves, I like to use this explanation for my clients. It's like your biggest fear was being left outside. You could die from hunger, or a wild animal could eat you up. And even though we're not living like that way these days, being in a body that doesn't conform feels that way. So a lot of people feel unsafe in a body that's not thin. And of course, for me, I'm speaking as a woman with thin privilege, but I talked to Caitlin about this on her podcast, and I said, I grew up in an environment where it was the opposite, where thin people were looked at as they were unhealthy and they were struggling. In that society was more about how much do you have on your body. And then I moved to Canada and it's different. So we really need to recognize, what is it that I'm chasing and what am I afraid of? And when you're looking at that feeling, is it possible to get it right now? Right? Because if for people who think about, for health reasons, if being thin kept you from falling sick, why do we have people who are thin and they're having chronic pain? They're having chronic health issues, right? And we also have people who are in larger bodies who are doing very well. They're very athletic. They're doing all these things. So it's not about the body size. That's just what we're told to think. It's more about the feeling that we want when we get to that size, because we think that's what's going to qualify us. And then people would love me. And then I can be qualified to say, oh, I'm a good mom because I conform. So it's really important to think about that. And there's no rush. Your journey is your journey. Right now, I tell people, yes, intuitive eating is all the rave. It's like if you're not doing intuitive eating, then you're not, in vogue. And that's not the right way to motivate yourself to go on intuitive eating journey. Think about what you want. Maybe now is not the time. What can you do while you're now? Can you just sit down and think about what drives me to eat? How do I enjoy eating my food? When I eat this way, do I feel good? When I sleep this way, do I feel good? And start thinking about those behaviors, because there's a ton of research that has shown that when people actually feel good about themselves, they're more motivated to take those health promoting behaviors. And that's what we want.
Yeah. 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 You've given me so much to think about. It's like, oh my God, I don't even know where to start. Um, uh, yeah, it's also interconnected because when you say, someone who's feeling good has a tendency to make, you said it much better than I'm trying to relay it, but basically when you're feeling good, you're more motivated to do the good things to keep it going.
Yeah,
And for me that ties to, the just constant feeling of burnout.
absolutely.
Like I I don't want to put energy towards anything once I'm done for the day. Um, but I really appreciated what you said about there not being a rush. And it's funny because I've started to dabble with all of this, as I've mentioned, and I've dabbled with it with my own therapist. And, I, at some point a few weeks ago, I said to her, I'm going to get the book. I'm going to keep interviewing these people that know about this and can help me and this and that. And I'm going to keep learning. And I'm okay if it takes me a little while. I am. And then what's starting to happen, however, is that as the world has started to open back up again, I've been faced with going out in public and having to be around friends and family who haven't seen me in a while and who might be, who are obviously going to notice that I'm looking much different than I have in the entire time that they've ever known me. And I'm so insecure about that. And it's really hard because I have this conversation and I go, take your time, do it the right way, learn about this. Like the real overall lifelong message that I want is the overwhelming like body positivity and everything you said about what intuitive eating means. I want that. But then I go out to a party with people and I'm in a dress in a size that's 3 sizes larger than I've ever been, and I'm like, well, no, now I want it now. Now I want like it's this constant seesaw.
Hmm.
It's exhausting.
It is. It is very
Yeah.
exhausting. And I'm totally there with you. This is a normal experience for so many of us.
Mm-hmm.
We're always going to have those feelings. We're always going to have those experiences because that's just the way the society is. Maybe our kids won't have to go through this. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But for us, living in the world this way, it's like, what can I control and
Yeah.
what can't I control? So, for so many
Mm-hmm.
of us going back into the world, it's a lot of anxiety for us. I see that with my clients as well. So, we've really, really talked about how do we create that space for you to be able to go out into the world in this body and be okay. And maybe there are days when you'll just feel like crap, and that's okay. I think one of the misconceptions that we have is we should always have all these positive feelings and feel good about things all the time. That's
Mm-hmm.
not the normal human experience. Human experience involves negative experiences, negative emotions, and that's okay. So if we could just own that and say, you know what, today I'm not feeling very great, maybe I just want to sit in my house and not talk to people. Or if I go out and someone makes a comment, how will I respond? That's all we can do. We can't control other people's opinions of us because they also are struggling on their own,
Yeah.
right? Because we
Mm-hmm.
have our stories, but other people also have the things that make them feel insecure. And once
Mm-hmm.
we recognize that everyone has that struggle, it really helps us to realize that, you know what? This is a human experience. I wanted to touch on something that you said about I'm learning and I'm just reading the book and talking to these people. That's absolutely great. But what I want to offer you is what if you could just take the first step
Mm.
to do the work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because this is another thing that we do. It's like, oh, I'll know when I should do it. But do you really know? How will you know it's time to start?
No, I know. I know. I know. I know. I do this with a lot of things. It's like I dance around it. Even the show, I dance around it, and then it's like one day either it just snaps or it all comes together. But I know.
That's the
I
thing.
know.
That's one of the things that our brains do that is so spectacular. It's like when it knows that there's a change coming, it'll
Yeah.
just keep you in that cycle of just dancing around it. So you have to be the one to interrupt, right? Just interrupt and jump
Okay.
into it.
Yes, I know. I know you're right. I know. I'm just tired.
And I hear you.
I know, but you're right because it's especially with the what we're talking about, it is every day. Every day we're faced with food. Every day we're faced with our bodies. Every day. Well, it's not going anywhere. I'm not all of a sudden tomorrow going to wake up and not have to feed myself. It's going to happen every single day.
Don't forget the kid. You have to fit the kid
I
too.
know. All right. So let's do that a little bit. How what do we do with our kids and the next gen? Like what do we do?
That's a really big one. And for one, I would say it starts with us, but for
Mhm.
some of us, we're still yet to do that work,
Mhm.
right? So, what I always offer parents or people who are taking care of young children is start as early as possible. Could you just create an environment where food is seen as food? We're
Mm.
not putting one food on a pedestal. All foods are seen as equal.
Mm.
Could you create an environment where your emotional, your physical response to your child eating a bar of candy is the same as your child eating two sticks of carrots?
Mhm.
Could you create, and I see that look on your face, which I see a
What
lot.
look? What? There's no look.
That one, right? I see that a
Yeah.
lot with my clients. It's like,
I know.
what do you mean? What do you mean I
Yeah.
need to give them the candy? They'll ask for that all the time. Again, because that's what we've been taught. We've been taught
Mm.
that, oh, the kids will get addicted. The kids will want that all the time. But that's actually not true. That's actually
Mm.
not true. And if we could just give ourselves room to think, what if? What if I could create a house where my kids are free to eat whatever they want and I don't judge them and I'm not afraid that they're going to become, people who live in larger bodies? What if I could create an environment where my kid can eat whatever they want and I don't have to tell them, you need to eat your lunch, else you don't get your dessert or you don't get candy? Can I create an environment where food is just food? That's always the first step I encourage parents. It's just, what can you do within your own means? It's not about going and buying all the foods, but just have a conversation with your child.
Mhm.
What would you like? What do you want to eat that we're not eating?
Mm.
Because your kid will tell you.
Yeah. Okay, so you're gonna have to explain this a little bit more for me. So let's say, so what about, I guess what I'm trying to get to is using the candy bar example. There are, there is a massive amount of sugar in a candy bar that is designed to make it somewhat addictive. Or is that like completely something that's been sold to me?
What do you think?
No.
Right? So let's just unpack that statement. There's a massive amount. What
Yeah.
does massive mean?
Like in one candy bar there's like, I don't know, 30 grams of sugar.
How
And
confident are
like,
you when you say that?
I'm like, I'm fairly, it's a lot though, no? What is it, like 20? Or is it 50? Which way are we going? Oh my god, I'm freaking out.
We can go whichever way you want to go, right?
Hmm.
That's what we're taught. It's like, oh, the sugar is going to make them addictive. But really, is that really what's going to happen? Humans are innately attracted to sweet things.
Okay.
It's in our DNA. But that
Okay.
doesn't mean that having candy is going to make you addicted.
Okay.
When
I
we
think we also go ahead. Go ahead.
when we eat things that are sweet, right? Like
Mhm.
kids,
Mhm.
there's something that happens. We feel really happy, right? That
Mhm.
reward center of the brain gets activated. So we feel good. And that's why
Mhm.
we want it. So when a parent says, "Oh, I'm afraid my child's going to get addicted," the reason why it feels like your child will be addicted is because you've restricted for a long time. So without restriction, there is no fear of addiction. Even this happens with grown-ups who start the intuitive eating journey. When we get to making peace with food, where they allow previously forbidden foods back into their diets, you'll
Yeah.
find that you get really fixated on that food. So a lot of
Yeah.
people, maybe they never had chocolate and all of a sudden that's all they want to eat. And I tell them,
Mhm.
go ahead, eat all the chocolate you want. Sometimes it takes a day, sometimes it takes 2 days. I remember one client who was like, "Oh my goodness, I made waffles. We ate waffles for 2 days, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then by the third day, it was just breakfast and lunch. And when we had our coaching session, which was the fourth day, she only had waffles for breakfast."
Mhm.
Because there's something called the habituation effect. And this is also in the intuitive eating book whenever you get around to it. And this is all like with repeated exposure, you get
Mhm.
bored. That's the simple way I
Mm.
can explain that. And that's the
Okay.
same thing with kids. When you give them that candy without any judgment, it's like, oh, here, it's just food. The same way you would offer them cucumbers, the same way you would offer them whatever. It's like, okay, let's just eat this and see. The
Mhm.
first day, first couple of weeks, they might really just want to do that because there's the fear that they're never going to have it again, right? There's the fear
Mhm.
that, oh, we never get to have candy. Might as well eat everything now because who knows, mom's going to stop us. And that's where I always encourage parents, you need to speak to yourself, hold yourself through that experience because your brain is going to go crazy. What are you doing? It's fine. And over time, the kids won't want it anymore. I did that with my kids. I let them have all the candy they wanted. And now there are days when we just have candy sitting, no one's paid attention. It's like, oh, and we always talk about it. So we'll be like, oh, remember that time when you guys were eating candy every day? Oh, yeah, mom. I remember I had a tummy ache. Now I know not to have 2 bars. I only eat one because when I have two, my tummy hurts. That's how the child knows eating 2 bars of candy is bad for me
Mhm.
rather than you telling them that eating 2 bars of candy is bad
Like
for them.
shaming them into it.
Exactly. So they
Yeah.
learn from their own experience. And of course, when it comes to parents, I always use Ellen Satter's framework as well. I don't know if you're familiar with Ellen Satter. She's
Mm-mm.
a family therapist and dietitian who really is a pioneer for feeding kids. So I use
Mhm.
her framework in my coaching as well. And we as parents still have the power to create that structure. So even if we say, yes, it's okay to bring the foods in, you get to decide what kinds of foods you let your children eat within
Mhm.
your home environment. But within
Mhm.
that selection, let them have free reign and experiment with your support. And that's how they learn.
Mhm.
There's no addiction if there's no restriction.
Oh, I like that. Okay, so we might have to just mentally prepare for like a few days of what feels like absolute chaos.
Absolutely. Might
Yeah.
take you weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of my my brother-in-law and my niece and nephew come over to our house and stay for the weekend about once a month. And he always brings these mini like chocolate chip muffins from Whole Foods.
Mm.
And he'll bring like 4 boxes of them. And my daughter goes nuts over them. And it's like she just can't help herself. And it's not that I don't it's hard because it's not that she doesn't have access to sweets at home, but it's not, it is very controlled.
Mm-hmm.
It is very, here, oh, you want this? Okay, here's one,
Mm-hmm.
or here's two at a time. Or if it's too close to bedtime, it's you're having it tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do I, what make sense of what I'm saying.
I can totally I can totally relate. Here, I'll tell you a story. And because she's giving me permission to share this, I had a client who gummy worms was her thing. She was like,
Mhm.
my daughter wants gummy worms all the time. And I said, well, when does she want it? Oh, she wants it for breakfast. Okay, go ahead and give her. And her face literally just dropped. Aren't
Mhm.
you a nutritionist? You should be telling me not to do that. I said, no. Again, there's no addiction if there's no restriction. So let's
Okay.
just see what happens. And we worked together for 3 months. Now we did our 1 month follow up. And she goes, you were so right. Because her daughter knew when she had enough. She was not even asking for gummy worms anymore at breakfast time. He was like, okay, can I just have one? They
Mhm.
went to her parents. She set the boundary about food and body conversations so the parents did not interfere with what they were doing. Kid asked for candy once for breakfast, and that was it. And
Mhm.
she goes, I was so worried about this. Our biggest thing is always that fear,
Yeah.
right? It's always that fear of what if. So take
Yeah.
yourself there. What if it happens? What are you going to do? Can you be okay with that? As long as your child is safe,
Mhm.
what are you going to do? And let them
Mhm.
just, okay, this is what you want. Fine. No restriction, no rules. Still give them that structure. If you're still too worried, you can create an atmosphere where you say, okay, how about we create some kind of agreement? You can have your cupcakes at whatever time.
Mhm.
Do you want one or do you want two or do you want three? How would you like it? Okay,
Mhm.
how about you sit with her and eat too? Normalize eating that because, again, our children are always watching. A lot of us
I
think
know.
it's by talking that the kids learn, but they actually watch you. So if you're not eating the cupcakes and you're like, oh, well, I don't want to eat that because it's going to do this, or no, I don't want that, they're watching. And it's more like,
Mhm.
mommy doesn't really care about this, so I might as well just do it and do all I can before she changes her mind. So normalize that. I'm not going to take the food away. It's here if you want it. I just want to make sure that I'm supporting you
Mhm.
and see what
Mhm.
happens.
Mhm. So the example, well, a question that's coming to mind. I have two questions. One is kind of a silly thing that's coming to me, but like the whole idea of a birthday cake. Like I remember on my kid's first birthday party, she's 1 years old, and everyone is like, "Give her the cake, put it in her face," like blah blah blah, and I'm like, "No, she doesn't even know what cake is. She doesn't care. This and that." And I'm perhaps using a 1 year old is not the best example, but what I'm getting at is touching on what you said earlier about taking away like the emotion of food and how we use food as a celebratory, as social, as a way to cope. Like with kids, where is that line? Like I've never been like when she knew what sweets was, I was not, no, you can't have your birthday cake. Like obviously have your birthday cake, but that's there's emotion there. Like
Hmm.
I don't know.
I get
When
what you mean. All eating is emotion. All
yeah.
eating has emotional connection to it. The only
Yeah.
reason why a lot of us feel bad or guilty about saying emotional eating is because we've been told that it's wrong,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of us worry about the weight gain that we're going to get if we eat emotionally. But eating is
Mhm.
on a continuum. So you have people who eat when they're happy. We use food for celebrations. When people are getting married, there's a wedding cake. When someone is having a birthday party, there's birthday cake. We go out for ice cream with our kids just because that all has an emotional component to it.
Mhm.
So if you don't make it a big deal, the kids are not going to make it a big deal. The problem happens when we use food to cope. That's our only coping tool. So typically we'll have some extreme emotions. So whether it's extreme happiness or extreme sadness, and rather than tune into what exactly am I feeling right now, we turn to food. And typically this will show up in kids where they may hurt themselves, maybe they stub their toe, and you're trying to make them feel better. Oh, can we go have ice cream to make you feel better? You're
Mm-hmm.
not thinking about that at that time, but what we're teaching the child is ice cream makes everything feel better,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how about we focus on, okay, can we do some breathing or let's rub on it so that the pain subsides? How can I support you? Could you maybe give them a hug so they feel that comfort, they feel safe? And once that's handled, oh, would you like to go for ice cream? We're not saying so that you feel better, right? Because we don't want to connect the two. Would you like to
Mm-hmm.
go for ice cream? Okay. And we go for
Mm-hmm.
ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
They don't connect the two. And that's just pretty much what we do. If they're having a birthday cake, by all means have the birthday cake. There's nothing wrong with that. It's what when we start to make something out of that, when we start to assign meanings to that, that's when the problem happens.
Mm-hmm. Oh boy, it's a lot. It's a lot to deconstruct
Mm-hmm.
when you really get talking about it and realize how every not every, that's silly, but how so much of what we think is innate about how we feel and think about food is actually what's been sold to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And it's a
Yeah.
lot of work to deconstruct it too. I
Yeah.
always tell the women that I coach, you have to really be compassionate on yourself. Two things: have self trust and have your own back, and also be very compassionate because it'll bring up a lot of things. Like I was talking earlier about, oh, I should have known better. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
mom, so I should know better. No, you didn't
Yeah.
know, because if you knew, you would have created a different result, right?
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
really need to cultivate that compassionate muscle to hold space for ourselves and give grace.
Yeah. Yeah. And, similarly to how under my own roof, I can be all about my own body image and my own body positivity, but then going out into the world, it's like the same thing. We have to sort of brace ourselves in a way for going out into the world and having people around us judging and making comments, having opinions about how our kids eat or don't eat. I mean, even just today, I sent my daughter to preschool for her first day, and the note said to send her with a snack. And in bold, it was like a healthy
Healthy.
snack. And I literally, I paused at that because, what? It just is such it just seems so silly, I mean, we all have our own idea about
Hmm.
what healthy is. And at the end of the day, we're dealing with 3-year-olds who it's better that I send her with something she's going to eat
Hmm.
rather. I mean, and my kid is, because I was like a wiggy first time mom where everything was like super rigid and blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, my daughter's idea of a snack is hummus and peppers. Like, that's my kid. But
Wow.
well, she likes she likes pudding and things like that. But
Hmm.
if I send her with that, she's not going to be like, what is this? No, no, no. Like,
Hmm.
she'll eat it. But my brain went, well, I'm also going to put these crackers with cheese in there. And like someone might see that and go, well, cheese isn't healthy. Like
Hmm.
I don't know. It's just a
Hmm.
funny,
It is
funny
funny. And
thing.
I'm laughing
Yeah.
because in my previous life, I used to work in public health nutrition. And I remember we would have these, displays or classes where sometimes we would talk about what's healthy and what's
Mm-hmm.
not healthy. And I found that some of that information had a lot of diet culture connotations to it,
Mm-hmm.
which, of course, knowing what I know now, it's like, I didn't really see that. And of course, we
Mm.
don't, because all of this is part of the system. So,
Right.
yes, we have the movement for food and body freedom, but the culture, the teachings in school still have a lot of work. They still have a
Yeah.
long way to go. And it's up to us as moms, as caregivers, to just define what does healthy mean in our homes and let that be
Mm-hmm.
the culture in our homes. Because when we teach our kids and help them to cultivate that at home, they can go out and they can engage with food and they can engage with other people around food and be very confident in their ability.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that like Dr. Coniston talked a lot about this, and she's done a lot of the actual research on the connection, or actually the lack thereof, between quote unquote health and weight.
Mm-hmm.
And where I struggle with that is, yeah, as part of the system, I go to my doctor and I get on the scale, and he or she is going to look at me and go, well, your BMI is like super unhealthy and ba, 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 ba. And it's like, I'm like, you're looking at this person who's delivered your babies and you trust them and you like them, and they're basically telling me I'm obese.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, it's something. It's something, isn't it?
It's definitely something.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, Unyime, is there anything that you would have wanted to make sure that we touched on today, or make sure that you said today that we haven't so far?
Um, Actually, no, I think we covered a lot of ground. I'm really surprised at how much we were able to cover, which I
Yeah.
find would be really helpful for people. I guess as a final word, just encouraging moms to really take the time and tune into yourself and focus on what exactly do you want in life? Because a lot of us
Mm,
don't get asked that question often, right?
yeah.
What do you want?
Yeah.
And how can you create that for yourself? If there were no rules, if there were no, this is the way you should be doing things, how can you create that for yourself in your little sphere,
Mm,
daily
mm-hmm,
practices? Because motherhood is chaotic.
mm-hmm.
It is chaotic. Even when your kids are grown, I talk to parents with older kids, it's just a different kind of chaos,
Yeah.
right? So just
Yes.
take the time and take care of yourself, prioritize your own care,
Mm,
and then just see what you can do to support yourself.
yeah. And if anyone is looking for some guidance from you on that, they can find you at Olive and Bliss Wellness
Yes.
on social media and at your website.
Yes, my website is oliveandbliss.ca. It has all the information. My podcast link is there, and my
Mm-hmm.
food freedom guide is there. All the details are on the website.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time. I clearly have a lot of work to do. And I'm going to hear your voice in my head every time I dance around it one more time.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to be here, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
I could listen to Unyime talk all day. And in fact, sometimes I do. Have you added her podcast, the Thriving Mom Podcast, to your library yet? Go do it now. It's an absolute cannot miss. I listen every week. Anyway, this is the third, in air quotes, installment of the food and body image journey for me. This is the episode where I start to connect the dots, and ultimately, Unyime hits me between the eyes and says, just do the work. And following this conversation, I did. I opened the Intuitive Eating book. I opened the workbook that goes with it. And I've really taken my journey to a different place. I don't know, it sounds so silly, but I can eat things now and not give myself a bag of crap or shame or guilt about it. I can understand that I don't need to finish everything on my plate if it's a treat or something I don't normally have, because I can have it whenever I want. It's hard to really put into words. I'm still working on that. And it's hard for me to explain how major that is, because unless you know what it feels like to do that almost every time you eat, to not do it is such a major relief. And I want to go back now to Caitlin's show for a moment and reiterate her point that whether or not you think you have an issue with food or body image, you've been brought up in diet culture. So something is showing up somewhere. Take a look at it. And now to Unyime's point, if we don't heal ourselves, how can we expect to end these cycles of constant dieting and shame around food for our kids? Unyime gave me so much to think about and ultimately was a driving force in me taking action. So thank you so much, Unyime, for your wisdom, your continued support, and for sharing your superpower with the world. We need more of it. And thank you for listening. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.